My name is Olivia Watson. 11 days before my wedding, I found out that my fiancé and my best friend were planning to destroy me. They didn't just want to break my heart. They wanted my company, my savings, every dollar I had built since I was 22. But they had no idea that I already knew. And they had no idea what I was about to do about it. If you're watching tonight, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. By the end of this story, you're going to feel something. I grew up outside Columbus, Ohio, raised by my father, Daniel, after my mother died when I was 7. He worked 2 jobs and never once complained. Some nights on the porch steps he'd tell me, "You don't have to be loud to be right, Olivia. You just have to be honest and let people hear it for themselves." I didn't understand what that meant until I was 30, standing in a hotel ballroom with a microphone in my hand. I built my company, Watson Design, from a card table in a studio apartment. By 29, it had 3 offices and 40 employees. I never had much time for love. I told myself I was too busy. The truth is, I'd watched my father grieve quietly for years, and some part of me was terrified of a love that size. Then I met Liam Carter at a charity gala. He spilled wine on my sleeve and handed me his jacket instead of apologizing. Over the next year and a half, he met my father, learned how I took my coffee, remembered my childhood dog's name. I let myself believe this was the love I'd been avoiding. Chloe Bennett had been my best friend since college. She drove 3 hours through a snowstorm to sit with me in a hospital waiting room the winter my father's heart scared us all. When she needed steady work a few years back, I hired her as my marketing director without a second thought. I trusted her like my own reflection. So when Liam proposed on a rooftop in November, I said yes before he finished the sentence. When I asked Chloe to be my maid of honor, there was no one else I considered. I didn't know that the 2 people I trusted most were already planning my downfall. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. My phone had died, so I picked up Liam's iPad to check a venue email. There was a folder I'd never noticed, labeled Meeting Notes. I thought it was work. It wasn't. It was voice recordings. Dozens of them, going back 4 months. Liam's voice, then Chloe's, talking about his debt. Almost $2 million from a real estate deal that collapsed the year before we met. He had never told me. Then I heard Chloe say, "Once you're married, the transfer goes through clean. 20% of the company, structured as a consulting agreement. Nobody questions it until it's already done." I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't remember deciding to. My legs just stopped holding me up. I kept listening anyway. Liam said, "She trusts me completely." Chloe laughed. "She trusts everyone completely. That's the funny part. She'll probably thank us for the wedding." There were more recordings. One about timing the transfer right after the honeymoon, before my company could review any paperwork. One about keeping my father busy during the reception so he wouldn't notice anything. One from a hotel room I recognized from a business trip 4 months earlier. I won't describe that part. You can imagine it well enough. Near the end of one recording, Liam laughed and said, "God, she really thinks this is real." I sat on that floor for almost 2 hours. I didn't cry, not at first. I just kept pressing play, waiting for it to sound different. It never did. 11 days. That's how long I had until the wedding. I want to tell you I called someone, or screamed, or threw the iPad across the room. I didn't do any of that. I heard Liam's key in the door before I had time to fall apart. I wiped my face, put the iPad back exactly where I found it, and smiled when he kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong. That was the moment I understood what the next 11 days would cost me. Somewhere around 3 that morning, I thought of my father's voice again. "You don't have to be loud to be right." I decided I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let the truth speak for itself on my own terms, at a time I chose myself. The next 11 days were the hardest of my life. I smiled through cake tastings. I sat through a dress fitting where Chloe held my veil and told me I looked beautiful. I told her thank you, and neither of us blinked. One evening, Liam held my hand across the table and told me he couldn't wait to spend his life with me. I almost asked him why he was doing this. Instead, I asked him to pass the salt. On day 3, I called my father and asked, "Dad, how did you know Mom really loved you?" He was quiet, then said, because she never needed anything from me that she couldn't have gotten on her own. She just wanted me. I hung up and cried for the first time since the kitchen floor. On day 4, I met with Priya Malhotra, the lawyer who'd handled my business for years. I played her the recordings. When it ended, she said, "Olivia, we need to lock down your company's ownership today. And we need to document all of this very carefully." We spent the next several days making sure Liam could never legally touch a single share of Watson Design. I also had a colleague quietly pull Chloe's employment file. I'd written the termination clause myself 3 years earlier, never imagining I'd need it for this. On day 7, I called the hotel's event coordinator and asked her to have a cable ready at the head table, connected to the ballroom speakers, for a short audio surprise during my toast. She said it was a lovely idea. She had no idea what I meant. That week I started a small notebook because I didn't trust myself to say certain things out loud yet. One entry says only this: "I am not angry anymore. I am becoming something else." The rehearsal dinner was held at the Larkspur Hotel, overlooking the river. Nearly 100 people came. Liam gave a toast about how lucky he was. Chloe gave one about our friendship, about the snowstorm and the hospital, and her voice actually broke. For 1 second, some small part of me almost believed her again. Then it was my turn. I stood up, reached for the small gold pendant at my collarbone, the one my mother left me, and took the microphone. "Before we finish the evening, I have a surprise gift I'd like to share," I said, smiling exactly the way I'd practiced for 4 days. "I want you all to hear exactly how much my fiancé and my best friend truly love me." I connected my phone to the cable already waiting at the head table. And I pressed play. Liam's voice filled the room. Then Chloe's. The debt. The transfer. The plan for my father. The laughter. She really thinks this is real. I watched 100 faces shift from confusion to horror. My father's hand tightened around his glass. Liam's mother covered her mouth with both hands. Liam turned white. Chloe couldn't look at me at all. Not a single fork touched a single plate. I walked over to Liam first and handed him a folded document. "The wedding is off," I said. "I think you already knew that." Then I walked over to Chloe and handed her a sealed envelope. "You're terminated, effective tonight. Security will have your desk packed by Monday." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I picked up my clutch and walked out of that ballroom while 100 people sat behind me in complete silence. My father caught up with me in the lobby. He didn't ask a single question. He just put his arm around me and walked me to the car. 3 different guests had recorded the whole thing on their phones. Within a week it had moved through half our industry. Liam's business partners heard about his debt before his own mother did. Creditors started calling him directly. His car was repossessed. 2 lawsuits were filed against him within the month. Chloe never worked in marketing again in that city. Nobody wanted the risk. 6 months later, I heard the 2 of them had turned on each other so completely they weren't even speaking anymore. I found out later that Liam had grown up watching his own father lose everything in a business collapse, terrified of anyone seeing him as less than successful. Chloe, I think, had spent years measuring her life against mine, and decided that if she couldn't catch up, she'd take a piece of it instead. Neither excuse changed what they did. But it helped me understand they weren't cartoon villains. Just 2 frightened people who made cruel choices. I felt something when I heard all of it. But it wasn't joy. It was just quiet. I spent the following months doing something I hadn't done in years. I rested. I started therapy. One afternoon, my therapist asked me a question I still think about. What would you tell a client who built an entire company on being underestimated if someone tried to underestimate her one more time? I didn't have an answer that day. I do now. Almost a year after that night, I opened a new studio for Watson Design in Florence, Italy. I told myself it was a business decision. It wasn't, not really. I needed a place where nobody knew my name, or my story, or the wedding that never happened. The first few weeks there, I mostly ate dinner alone, and I didn't mind it. Silence didn't feel like something I had to manage anymore. It just felt like mine again. I met Luca Moretti 3 weeks after I moved. He was painting outside a cafe near the Arno River. He had no idea who I was, or about the company, or the money, or the ballroom. He just looked up and asked, in slow, careful English, if I wanted to sit down. We talked for 4 hours. He asked what I wanted, not what I did for a living. Nobody had asked me that in years. A few months later, his mother taught me to make pasta by hand in her kitchen, laughing every time I got the shape wrong. There was one evening early on when I almost pulled away from him for no reason at all, just out of habit, just because some old part of me still expected to be used eventually. He noticed. He didn't chase me or beg me to explain. He just said, "You don't have to earn being loved, Olivia." Not with me. I cried in his kitchen that night, and it didn't feel like breaking. It felt like finally putting something down. I finally understood what my father meant, all those years ago, about my mother. Luca has never needed anything from me that he couldn't get on his own. He just wants me. About 10 months after that night in the ballroom, I got an email from Liam. He said he was sorry. That he'd lost almost everything. That he thought about that night more than anything else in his life. He asked if we could talk, just once. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I wrote back 4 sentences. I told him I understood why he did it, and that I hoped he found his way to something honest eventually. I told him I wasn't angry anymore, and that I meant it. And I told him not to write again. My father was right, all those years ago on our porch steps. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs a chance to be heard, once, by the right people, at the right time. Chloe never wrote to me at all. Not once. I think that told me more about her than anything on those recordings ever did. If you've ever trusted someone who was only ever there for what they could take from you, hear this clearly. Some people stay close to you, not because they love you, but because of what they can get from you. Recognizing that and walking away from it is not cruelty. It is the most self-respecting thing you will ever do for yourself. Tell me in the comments if you've ever lived through something like this yourself. I read every one. I didn't lose Liam or Chloe or the wedding I spent a year planning. I lost 2 people who were never really mine to keep. And in a small studio by the Arno River, under a sky that has never once asked me for anything but honesty, I finally found the people who were.